A commenter recently asked a very interesting question on another video, which is how to get started with a historical capsule wardrobe. And that got me thinking about how convenient it might actually be for some of you to make one. Now, I myself do not have a historical capsule wardrobe, but I do have a lot of garments that I can mix and match and pair up together to kind of mimic one. I think too that by this point I know enough about what it's like to wear historical clothing every day that I could sort of sit down and devise a way that it would be easy for all of you to create your own historical capsule wardrobes. I should mention that because I only wear 18th and 19th century clothing for the most part, or some inspired clothing from those periods, this really is going to focus upon how to create a Georgian or a Victorian capsule wardrobe, though this information is applicable to any type of era or time period that suits you. So what is a capsule wardrobe? It is a small collection of garments which usually work together in both style and in color, which can be mixed and matched and put together into different ensembles. These can have a great range when it comes to number, but usually from what I've seen, it's typically 40 articles of clothing or less. The great thing about historical clothing is you clean it quite differently than you do contemporary clothing, as I've talked about in my How I Clean My Historical Clothes video. So you probably won't need an entire 40 garments in order to get going. This, of course, though, completely depends on your own personal preference. Typically as well, capsule wardrobes are made per season, so it would be one capsule per a specific season. But the other thing about historical clothing is that there are quite a few ways to create garments that are multi-seasonal, which means you probably won't need as many sets for specific seasons. I'll be diving more into depth on this point a little bit later. Though we do see a lot of matching sets all throughout history, to be honest, a lot of the working class would end up wearing mixed match garments. And I have a lot of theories as to why this might be. The biggest one being that clothes obviously were really expensive, and so perhaps they would have been passed down or piecemeal together. There are lots of reasons why this could be, and that really isn't the point of this specific video. But it is important to recognize that the working class did indeed wear a lot of mixed matched garments. So there are a number of ways to approach building your own historical capsule wardrobe. So I'm just going to roll out some steps and considerations that you can take in order to get going. I'm sure there are plenty of other approaches for how you can do this, but I think that this is a very easy and simple way that will just help provide you with some of the information or just some of the brainstorming you might need in order to get going. I would highly recommend sketching out your ideas, even if you're not someone that draws very often. Just a simple human form will do, and you can actually go online and find 18th or 19th century coloring book pages which will show, say, a woman's figure dressed in certain clothing, and you can just color in those pieces of garments and kind of create color combinations in your head. First things first, you'll want to stick to two-piece sets, because obviously a one-piece set is going to be a little bit difficult to mix and match because it's just one connected garment. So there isn't really any way to break that up and then mix it with another garment per se. So you might want to stick with a bodice along with a petticoat. And for more masculine garments, you'll probably want to stick to jacket, shirt, waistcoat sets along with trousers. Now going back to more feminine garments, because obviously that is what I like to wear, a lot of the time two-piece sets were still referred to as a dress or a gown. There is some talk about what defines a dress from a gown historically, but the Met seems to actually use the term gown as well for two-piece sets. For example, they sometimes use the term evening gown, which tends to have a two-piece set. So for that reason, I'm not going to go into the politics of the differences between gown and dress. To be completely honest, they're pretty unclear and uncertain, and it's quite difficult to find a lot of reading on this topic. So because of that, I'm just going to use the differentiation that the Met does, which in this case, they use it quite interchangeably. The next thing you'll want to do is to decide on a period of time that really calls to you. So for example, this could be Georgian, Victorian, medieval, Tudor, Edwardian, really anything that suits your own personal interest and your own desire to dress as. It could also be beneficial to narrow this down even further and pick a specific set of decades that you like to wear. That's because some garments are a little bit difficult to pair up due to these silhouettes being so different, because women's fashion changed all the time, and so it became a little bit difficult to not have to completely remake an entire garment to fit the new silhouette. If you just imagine someone wearing an 1830s sleeves bodice along with a bustle skirt. That could be a perfect example of how these silhouettes sometimes don't work together, though in all honesty, that could be a pretty interesting look. Some periods of time are definitely much easier to historically adequately mix and match. A lot of the 18th century is that way because garments did of course change, especially by the 1790s where the waistline started to rise way up. But overall, you can get away with most of these century silhouettes and pair them up together. You'll want to stick to solid colors as well, or simple patterns that you feel like will be versatile and won't necessarily clash with each other. Though to be completely honest, what clashed historically would be completely different than what we would consider clashing in a contemporary sense, because people were pairing up all sorts of weird patterns together and definitely were getting away with it. And in a lot of cases, it actually looks really interesting and really good. So you can experiment a little bit with pattern matching as well, because you never know what two patterns are actually going to end up looking good together. But if you want to keep things very simple and easy for yourself, then I would definitely just recommend sticking to patterns that you are familiar with and some colors that you know you're actually going to like and you're actually going to wear. This might totally contradict what I just said, but at the same time, don't limit yourself too much, and also remember to think outside the box a little bit. You might be surprised that the colors you actually like to wear are a lot more than what you initially thought they were. Some simple go-to patterns could be tartan for periods throughout the Victorian era and stripes for a lot of the Georgian period. There are also things like simple floral patterns or just some designs with small motifs. As long as you at least have some solid colors in there, then you can really mix and match a lot of different things together. This brings me to my next point, which is only include that which you will truly wear. That goes for a lot of things in life, actually. For example, my household is very big on organic gardening, and so we tend to not like to grow things that we're not actually going to eat, because then everything that you grow just ends up going to waste. This exact same principle can be applied into creating your historical capsule wardrobe, because there is no point in taking the time or paying the money to get things that you don't actually care for. So for example, if you hate wearing short sleeves, don't force yourself to add short sleeve garments into your capsule wardrobe. I really don't like wearing short sleeves or even really 3/4 length sleeves all that often. So for that reason, you will all probably notice that a lot of my garments in my collection are ones that are long sleeved. So if I were to make a historical capsule wardrobe, which I am kind of becoming more and more convinced of, I definitely wouldn't be including anything but long sleeve garments. And this actually brings me to my next point. Consider seasonality. Choose materials that are going to work with the majority of seasons, and this is definitely possible to do. This will equate to fewer sets of historical capsule wardrobes that you'll have to buy or that you'll have to make. And eventually that will save you both time and money. Two materials come immediately to mind for multi-seasonality, and that is both linen and wool. This is because linen helps you stay cool when it's hot, and it's very insulating for when it's colder outside. Thinner wools are actually a beautiful way to stay cool in hotter climates, and I explain this in more depth in my No, I am not hot in my historical clothes video, which I released some weeks ago. If you'd like to learn more about some of the unexpected qualities of wool, definitely be sure to go and check that video out, because I'm not really going to go into too much detail in this video about that part. So this means that including some garments into your capsule wardrobe made from thinner wools and also from lots of linen is a great way to help extend them into many different seasons. The same thing goes for long sleeves in hotter weather. If you love them, don't be afraid to include them into your multi-seasonal wardrobe, because they do actually help to keep your skin more protected from the sun. Wool also works great in thicker weights for warm winter clothing. Honestly though, a lot of the warmth for the winter season historically came from layering both under and over your main garments. So for example, you'd end up wearing more petticoats, another pair of stockings, a thicker pair of stockings. Perhaps you would put on a pair of wool combinations, or maybe you'd wear a mantle or some type of outer coat, cloak, or even cape. You could also wear shawls, hats, muffs, insulated gloves. Honestly, there were so many accessories and extra layers that were added on for the winter season that it makes sense that people were able to stay warm, especially with all the additional layered on clothing. Again, though, made from the appropriate materials. Keep in mind though that if you live in a place that has seasons, you will want to have at least 1 or 2 sets of warm winter outer garments, so that way you can layer those both under and over your main clothes to be able to help keep you even warmer. You might not need to factor this into the total quantity of your capsule wardrobe. They could just be garments that are sort of separate or independent from the main collection, but they are beneficial to have. Definitely pick warm outer garments that are in colors that you actually enjoy wearing, so that way you can feel very confident even in the winter season. You will also want to treat your capsule wardrobe of, I guess you could call them functional garments, so the ones that you just wear, like for example a bodice or a petticoat, separately from your undergarments. Undergarments are a very prominent part of historical fashion, which if you've been researching historical fashion for any time at all, you probably have been told this a zillion times. So you'll essentially want to have 2 capsule wardrobes, one for the functional garments and one for your undergarments. Luckily, you won't need that many undergarments aside from shifts or chemises and stockings, because those are the 2 things that got changed the most. I'm definitely going to be making a video in the near future of how exactly to build up your undergarment wardrobe, so that's definitely to come, and I'll be sure to link it up above once I finally do release that video. If your aim isn't for more historically accurate silhouettes, then this honestly doesn't matter, because you can history bound any silhouette that you want and still create a historical capsule wardrobe that doesn't need to include the same undergarments. Though I do always recommend a shift or chemise, and that's just because honestly they're amazing garments and so incredibly comfortable. Choose a color scheme, but don't be afraid to pair up bold colors. There's sort of a running game between my friend and I where we try to seek out the ugliest, prettiest Victorian things that we can, and let me tell you that the 19th century is full of this. It just doesn't quite feel Victorian if something isn't slightly ugly pretty. I'll give you some examples. Here is an antique 19th century brooch from my collection. It is a combination of bubblegum pink and cobalt blue. No one would really expect to put those 2 colors together, but it kind of just works, and it also kind of doesn't, but I like it. And you might be surprised to find this with certain clothing color combinations as well. It can sometimes catch you off guard what 2 colors do actually end up working well together, and some combinations will grow on you with time. So say you want to mix a dark blue with a bubblegum pink. Just go for it. To start with, just decide on 10 or more colors that you really enjoy, you love, or you're okay experimenting with, and start with those. You will basically want to create 10 matching sets of bodices and petticoats in the colors that you end up choosing, but then choose to wear them as mixed-matched garments. So for instance, you could have 1 yellow, 1 blue, 1 red, 1 brown, 1 deep green, 1 purple, 1 terracotta, 1 beige, 1 lighter brown, and 1 lighter blue, and then pair them up however you see fit. For example, the terracotta could go with the yellow, or the brown could go with the lighter brown for something a little bit more neutral. You could even go for a deep green with a purple, or a terracotta with a blue. This gives you a ton of different possibilities, and all of them end up somehow working together, especially if you're not afraid to experiment a little bit with different hues. You'll also want to stick to garments with similar silhouettes, if that's of course what you're going for. So for this example, I will use mid to late 18th century. I personally would choose a simple work set, which would include a fitted bodice and a petticoat. The fitted bodice would either have skirts of the exact same color and material attached to the seam line, or it would just have a longer extended front. The petticoats would just be basic pleated 18th century style, where there would be 2 sides to the skirt, each side being on a set of ties, and the back panel would be tied from back to front, and the front panel would be tied over that from front to back. You can always add some pleating variations to these skirts, because pleating really wasn't an exact science, but the way that I like to create my 18th century petticoats is just to have a big box pleat in the center and then have knife pleats going out on the sides. I make duplicates for both the front and back panels, but you can also vary that a little bit and do the back panel of the skirt a little bit different than the front panel. It's just completely up to you. Once you've sewn or purchased a set in the exact same color, you can go ahead and make duplicates of this, and then eventually mix and match them up. You can also alter the styles of the bodices subtly because there wasn't just one style of bodice during the, say, 18th century, but I honestly suggest that the simpler the better. If there's a silhouette that you really love to wear, just make different garments of those, and the colors will bring plenty of more variety to your wardrobe, so you won't feel like you're constantly wearing the same exact outfit. Remember too that if you're worried about getting bored, you can always have other garments outside of your main capsule wardrobe, and there is plenty of opportunities to add accessories. Accessories can drastically change a garment. A lot of workwear clothing typically included an apron or some type of cap, so you can make an apron in a matching color for each set as well to further diversify things, or you can have a wild card color, which is basically just making an apron out of some type of random material or color that you enjoy. Some 18th century caps and fichus were made from a white cotton or linen, so if you want to keep it nice and simple, just have a few sets in a white light fabric, but you can add colored silk or satin ribbons to your caps as well, just to create a little bit of a connection to the ensembles that you are wearing. So if your bodice is, say, blue, you can include a blue ribbon for your cap as well. Finally, let's focus a little bit on shoes. To keep it very simple, pick a few pairs of shoes in colors that you know you are going to wear. So I personally really like to wear neutral toned shoes, so I have a pair in white, a pair in black, and usually a pair in brown. If you have a color that you really love as well that is maybe a little bit more vibrant, definitely don't be afraid to get a pair of shoes in that color too. So for instance, I really love the color blue, though I do not own a pair of blue shoes yet. Even if you might like something which might not match from a contemporary perspective, there is a pretty good chance that it will match from a historical perspective. We can see this by looking at pretty much any fashion plate. There are many examples of kind of obscure yet somewhat charming color combinations that existed all throughout history. So I hope that this has been helpful for getting you to brainstorm some ideas for your historical capsule wardrobe. I did actually put together a little list, which can be an easy reference guide for you all, which I've linked down in the description box below. I hope that you all can benefit from this when you actually do sit down to plan your own historical capsule wardrobes, because then you can just go down the list and see if there's anything that you might be forgetting. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on Thursday for another video.